The topic today is circles of the avatar and Meherabad's Mandali. They are essentially the same. Some people are interested in the how and what, and some people like Franny are just more interested in the personal stories because they're about her old friends and family. Baba often reminded us that the whole purpose of the dream of creation was to eventually have us awaken from that dream. Us means drop souls of the infinite ocean, to awaken from that dream, to realize that we are actually the infinite ocean. Very simple answer to that. We simply have to forget our false selves. And when that happens, then naturally what's real is left there, because the false has finally stopped and died. Almost impossible, Baba says, to do that. So, pardon?
They can't hear you.
Can't hear?
No, you have to talk about
Okay.
Well, get on
Is this in the right position here? Is that all right?
Pretend like you're working on the roof. Can we keep the mic?
You want volume up on that one?
Yes, it's working. Just move the Here, I'll turn it up. It's not up.
Okay.
Is there anyone who doesn't have
Don't turn it here.
I'm turning it up and then I'll turn it down.
Okay. Turn it over there. Hello. Okay. Hello, hello. So the simple answer is we have to forget our false selves. And then the real is automatically revealed. That there is only one. As Baba said, God is eternally impersonal. So a few make some progress by meditating on the original, unmanifest, impersonal aspect of God. God and love are identical, but for the average person, it's very difficult to relate to impersonal and love. How do they go together? So, the eternally impersonal God takes form, is born as the perfectly personal God-man to expedite his spiritual work in any time, any given time, for all those souls who need it. There's another aspect to that, and that is that it is most charming that he comes to be perfectly personal. And that is the perfect solution. The problem is that a distraction is required from the false self. And his being absolutely most charming and perfectly personal is the perfect distraction from our false selves. Every time he comes, There is a group of people around him known as a circle. It's the same for all perfect masters, also Baba explained. The first circle, you can see this chart here. This is a chart that's reprinted from the discourse Baba gave on the avatar circle on the wall. Every perfect master, Sadguru, Kutub, whatever you call him, has a circle of 12 men and 2 women, which is the same in the first circle of the avatar always. It is a great privilege to be in the circle of any perfect master, and very rare to be in the circle of the avatar. It is, remember, on average over 1,000 years that these 122 people take their places, their posts in the avatar circle. It is not the typical destiny of any soul to do that. It requires thousands of lifetimes of preparation and connection. And Baba explained it like this. He explained about sanskaras. Nobody explains about sanskaras that drive everything in creation like Meher Baba. From the very beginning to the very end, he said, everything is under, the Vedantic word is prarabdha sanskaras. Prarabdha means destiny, and all those sanskaras that work within the law of karma are in duality. So the soul goes through this experience of oscillation between opposites. And that's what prarabdha means. Ultimately, that gets resolved into a destiny. What happens at a certain point is there are connections for some who are connected to persons beyond them who have, by a rare occurrence, become a perfect master, may come into the circle of that perfect master if they are connected with him properly from the beginning. That association happens like that. In the circles of the perfect master or the avatar, their sanskaras are transmuted into, Baba explained this, vijnani sanskaras. Vijnani means, it's a Vedantic word that means the threshold of divinity. It's a veil. These sanskaras are identical to the veil that is put upon the avatar before that veil is lifted by one or more of the perfect masters in every advent. Same type of sanskaras. The difference in when the prarabdha becomes transmuted in these people is that they can never incur any more karmic debt, no matter what they do. In 1927, Baba drew a diagram of 2 wheels to explain this to the Mandali. One wheel turns both ways. He said, this is the way ordinary minds work. They are caught in duality. For the minds of my circle, he said, they can only work one way towards me. They can never incur new sanskaras. No matter what they appear to be doing, they can never incur any karmic debt. So what the avatar does is take their destiny. Now they're veiled under vijnani sanskaras. It's a veil. They don't consciously experience that. But through that spending of their final impressions, sanskaras, he uses that in his work. And through them spending their final balance, he accesses humanity in all the various different ways. Each of them have to retain some quirk or weakness. The better that is, the more useful they are in his work to access that strata of humanity. Means, I'll give you an example. We'll get to that later, but that means each of them have, we'll get to that later. I wanted to read something here that explains this thing, the veil. Because, you know, ordinary masters would occasionally meet Baba and ask him, what experiences are you giving your disciples? You know, I show mine some colored lights and things, and, you know. Kirpal Singh asked Baba that, and Baba said, really, to me, there's only one experience, and that's the experience that I experience. And all these other so-called experiences are bogus, so what's the point of distracting people with them? There's only one worth giving. And that's really ultimately why the perfect masters and the avatar do this. But this is out of the blue in one of the early discourses. Baba was explaining progress through the planes for the aspirant and all that. Talking about the necessity to experience the plane at some point, the planes. But then he says, when a disciple has a perfect master, he has to traverse all the 6 planes. But the master may take his disciple through the inner planes either with open eyes or under a veil. If the disciple is taken under cover and is not conscious of the planes he is crossing, desires persist until the 7th plane. But if he is taken with open eyes and is conscious of the planes he is crossing, no desires are left on and after the 5th plane. If the master comes for work, he often chooses to take his disciples under cover, for they are likely to be more actively useful for the master's work when taken blindfolded than when taken with open eyes. That explains that important distinction. And Meher Baba was just all about work. You know, Ward's been referring to subtle physiology, and we've been thinking about that subject. We know we're not our bodies, they are the biomechanical vehicles that are used for experiencing life. Yet, Baba has given some fascinating explanations about the body. It is that you'll never find anywhere else. The human body, he says, is actually innate in the whole process of evolution of consciousness. Even from stone form, the goal of all evolution of consciousness is the human body. And through that process, through the kingdoms, all the different kingdoms in the evolution of consciousness, he said the soul goes through all of these things. There are 7 turns and 5 twists, or something, twists and turns. I think it's 5 and 7, that the soul goes through the positions of the focus of consciousness until finally full consciousness is experienced in the human form, and the human body is the result of how the soul with full consciousness relates to the universe. So now I think I will read this discourse that was given. You know, in the early days, when we were there with the Mandali in the 70s, this talk about circles, we never heard this kind of thing much. He said, yeah, go read it in the discourses. It's there. What do you... at the time, this discourse was not published for us yet, as of yet, the discourse on the Avatar Circle, except in the Awakener magazine. we would ask the old disciples, what happens is this. It's like this. Let me look at this one more time. You know, the thing about the avatar circle is it is the responsibility of every sadguru, every perfect master, every avatar. The main responsibility is the realization of the circle. Because they relate to humanity, the world, the universe, through their circle. Baba said, I work directly for the universe through my circle. And all the necessary connected persons and souls to each of those circle members down line. It goes on, infinitely through the universe, those ramifications. This is a good explanation that is from what the discourse, the circle. The circles of the avatar, as well as the perfect masters, constitute the most important particular feature in relation to which and through which the avatar and the masters adjust their spiritual duty toward humanity. We'd ask Erich this thing about circles or whatever, and he said, well, you know, for me, this is what happened. Their family joined the ashram in August 1938. Erich said after the first night sleeping in the old bungalow crowded with all the old Mandali, the next day he was walking up the hill with Baba holding the umbrella. Conversation, Baba said, how'd you sleep? Fine. Everything okay on the Mandali, old Mandali? Fine. Yes. What was the conversation? Mary said, I don't know, something about circles and something circle. Baba smiled and said, yes, for you, when you hear this talk about circles, you let it go in one ear and out the other. So that's the story we got when we would ask Erich about circles. But as the way things were with Baba is he would often talk about the work he was preoccupied with at any specific time. The very first work that the masters do, perfect masters and the avatar, is engage their circle members. It happens immediately. So in the early days at Meherabad, the subject was topic of conversation from time to time. Baba gave explanations. So people like Padre and Andi, we could ask them questions and they would frankly tell us what Baba had explained in those early days. But when the discourses, the original 5 volumes, were printed, there was no information on the avatar circle much beyond a mention of it in this chapter, the circle. So there were more questions. Specifically, Phyllis Frederick had wanted to publish something in the Awakener, so Baba in 1955 in April dictated a very nice, very comprehensive explanation on the avatar circle to Mani. And that's what we have. Now, there's a reason I introduced this thing about the body and how the body is related to how the human, fully human consciousness interacts with creation. As you'll see in this discourse, in what we call the 7th edition, which was an edited edition, that discourse was added, but it was also edited. Because you will see there are a few points that are a bit startling for Western people, at least. When Ward did this, the reprint with the 4th edition, he added the original, which is also in Lord Mayher. So I'm going to read that original. If I can find it. And this chart goes along with it. Absolute oneness prevails in reality. Space and time are but illusory. They are merely the effect of the reflection of God's infinitude. When man realizes reality, the reflection which has estranged him from reality vanishes, and he experiences the absoluteness of the absolute oneness of God. And when such a man continues to live his life in illusion, he leads the life of the man-God or perfect master on earth. With his abiding experience of the absolute reality, he serves as the pivot around which rotates the entire cosmic universe. Every point in the cosmos is equidistant from the perfect master, who abides in illusion as the nucleus of the cosmos. Although the perfect master remains in illusion as the center of the cosmic periphery and radiates his influence uniformly over the entire universe, in his lifetime he gathers round him 12 men who directly have their center of interest in his individuality. These men, through their constant and close association with him in the past, right from the evolutionary stages of consciousness, reap the greatest benefit now when their past close associate has become a perfect master. Such a group of 12 men is called the circle of a perfect master. However, besides this group of 12 men, there is an appendage of 2 women to complete the circle of a perfect master in all its aspects. These 2 women also owe their position in regard to the circle, to their past connection with the perfect master. One or more of these 14 close ones associated with the perfect master realizes the God state during or after the lifetime of the perfect master, and in some instances after one or a few more reincarnations. However, the perfect master fulfills his obligations by establishing his circle during his lifetime, and the greatest good he bestows is God realization, with all its perfection to at least one from among his circle of 12 men. In the case of the avatar, it is different. He has 10 circles in all, as shown in the accompanying diagram. The first, or inner circle of the avatar, consists of 12 men with an appendage of 2 women, and each of the following 9 outer circles consists of 12 persons, both men and women. In all, there are 120 persons in the 10 circles of the avatar, plus the 2 women of the inner circle who are but the appendage to that particular circle, so 122 in all. Either one or more of the 108 members of the 9 outer circles realize the God state during or after the lifespan of the avatar, and some in the next incarnation or after a few more reincarnations. As in the case of the perfect master's circle, the inner circle of the avatar consists of only 12 men with an appendage of 2 women. The difference between the circle of the perfect master and the inner circle of the avatar is that the perfect master establishes his circle from amongst those who were closely connected with him right from the evolutionary stages of their consciousness. But the avatar, who in his recurrent advents neither passes through the process of evolution, reincarnation, nor involution, does not therefore have the same links of association to establish anew his inner circle with every advent. In short, whereas the perfect master establishes his circle, the avatar is directly allied with his inner circle, which is always the same in all advents. With his descent on earth, the avatar, as it were, brings along with him the association of his inner circle. The connection of the inner circle in relation to the avatar may be compared to that of a man who directly associates himself with the 14 parts of his own body. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, 1 mouth, 2 hands, 2 legs, and the trunk of the body itself, plus the external genitals and anus that act as the appendage to the body as a whole. As soon as a man is born, he directly makes use of these 14 parts of his body, and these parts in turn respond to his dictates individually or collectively. Similarly, with the advent of the avatar on earth, his inner circle of the same 12 individualities and the appendage of the same 2 individualities directly begin to function individually and collectively according to the dictates of the avatar himself. With every advent of the avatar on earth, the 12 men of the inner circle and its appendage of 2 women gather round the personality of the avatar as the self-same 14 types of individualities. These 14 different individualities in the shape of different personalities always occupy their respective offices whenever the avatar manifests on earth. And during and after the lifespan of the avatar, they, individually and collectively, function in the same way as their predecessors, who had held and functioned in the same offices of the inner circle during the past advents of the avatar. Therefore, it would not be wrong to say that with Christ's coming again come Peter, Judas, and all his apostles. But this can never mean that the very same Peter or self-same Judas reincarnates again and again. These can never reincarnate, as all of the 12 individual personalities of the avatar's inner circle attain God realization in every avataric period, either during or soon after the lifespan of the avatar. Once God realization is attained, reincarnation is impossible. The only exception to this rule is the avatar himself, who comes again and again to redeem humanity. It is not the same individualized personalities of the inner circle that reincarnate. It is the individualities of their particular offices that come with every advent of the avatar. It is because in all the avatar's advents, each of the 12 men and 2 women of the inner circle hold exactly the same office and function in exactly the same manner that it is said the avatar always brings with him the same circle. As soon as the veil with which the avatar descends on earth is rent by the then living perfect master or masters, and the avatar realizes his avatarhood, the 12 men and 2 women automatically group round the personality of the avatar to occupy their respective positions in the inner circle and to function as usual according to the dictates of the avatar of the age. The position of the avatar in regard to the inner circle and its function may be compared to a man asleep. As soon as the man is made to wake up through some external agency, and no sooner is he awake than he spontaneously finds that all the 14 parts of his body, as mentioned before, are already there in their individual roles, ready to function at the slightest wish of the man. Similarly, as soon as the avatar is made to realize his avatarhood through one or two or more of the perfect masters of the time, he also realizes that the 14 personalities in their characteristic roles of the inner circle are ready at hand to discharge their duties. To explain in detail why only these 14 particular personalities hold such positions in every advent of the avatar would take a volume of explanations. Who can become the 14 members, and how do they become attached to the inner circle of the avatar? These questions would require more volumes of explanation. Suffice it to say that each of these 14 particular personalities, when occupying the office and function of the inner circle, not only must resemble the characteristic individuality of his or her predecessor in the previous advents of the avatar, but must be exactly similar in all respects. For an example, one of the offices of the inner circle of Jesus Christ was held by Peter. At the second advent of Christ, this particular office must be held by another Peter, who may be named A, but having the same quality of mind and heart and other characteristics as of the Peter. The same applies to the office held by Judas, John, James, etc. of the inner circle in the time of Christ. All the 14 members of the Avatar's inner circle realize God by the grace of the Avatar during the same avataric period, which is of 100 years duration after the manifestation of the Avatar on earth. Regarding the outer circles of the Avatar, none of the 108 persons in the 9 circles holds any office similar to that held by those of the inner circle, and all of these 108 persons attain God realization by the grace of God, by the grace of the Avatar, but not necessarily during the Avataric period. These 108 persons of the outer circles have their respective places in the 9 circles in accordance with their past connections with the members of the circle ahead of them. For an example, the members of the second circle of 12 persons next to the inner circle are grouped around the Avatar in accordance with their past connections with the members of the inner circle. Similarly, the 12 persons of the third circle next to the second circle are grouped around the Avatar in accordance with their past connections with the members of the second circle, and so on, with all the remaining 7 circles. But all the circle members must get realization by the next advent. In those early days of explanations about the circle, when they would have tea with milk in it once a week on Thursdays, Bob would give these explanations in discourse, and they could sometimes have 3 or 4 cups of tea, not very big, but they would get caffeined up and they would be just listening to the explanations of Baba that were fascinating. It was during that time when Baba explained that he had been Shivaji, who was a great Maharashtrian hero in India, who fought against the Mughal rule in India. And he said at the time, Shivaji was a minor advent. So Baba then explained minor advents, that the Avatar from time to time has minor advents. He may even take a minor advent to contact one person, Baba said. It could be that important to accomplish that connection, that work. So Bob explained about the time of Shivaji. Do we have our first photograph up there yet?
If you would like.
I would like it, Bruce. It would be.
Okay. Well, let's see how strong your light is.
Can you see that photograph?
Not yet, hold
Okay. Do we pedal this thing?
It's timed out by,
Drink of water here.
if you had talked faster, I'm sure it would have been okay.
All right. It gives me a break to have a drink of water.
It's,
Is it there?
yeah. Is that the picture you wanted?
This is one of the first photographs, maybe the first photograph we have of Meherabad after God realization. We can say when this photograph was because of the baby sitting on the man's lap next to Meherabad. The man sitting next to Meherabad is Behramji, one of Baba's very first disciples. The books on the table are Persian books, and Behramji had started teaching, and Meherabad had started teaching Behramji Persian. The baby sitting on Behramji's lap is Baba's youngest brother, Adi. This photograph was taken sometime in 1915. Early in 1915.
Who's the dog?
That we still don't know. That's one of the So, when Baba gave this explanation about Shivaji, centuries before, he told the Mandali that several of them had been with him during the time of Shivaji. And he mentioned that Behramji here was actually the Mughal general Afzal Khan, who was killed in hand-to-hand combat by Shivaji. It was a fascinating thing to them. Shivaji is very well known in Indian culture. Not Baba's brother, no. This is Behramji Buaseb, later comes to be known as Buaseb. In Baba's explanation about how the circle members come to take their places automatically, they must be born during the time of the avatar. They have to take their positions. So even some of the childhood friends of Baba became his disciples. Dr. Ghani is a good example, Bailey, and a few others. But this is the first photograph I know of that was taken of Meherabad after God realization. It's a great photograph. Not yet, except that he did have actually a scar from a wound when he was younger. And that it was also a head wound that bled badly. Let's go to the next photograph. Okay, these are also some of the early disciples of Baba, and we'll just show you this for a while. But what I want to do is go back to the explanation about Shivaji and why that was important. What Baba explained at the time was that a perfect master of the time, Swami Ramdas, was the one who placed circle members into the posts for this advent of Meher Baba while Shivaji was there. So these interactions were happening with these people who were with Shivaji, and each of them at the time, through their interactions, were placed by Swami Ramdas, who was a perfect master, who had the responsibility of setting up the circle. So two things that are important here. The first thing is that it shows you the continuity of the divine plan between advents and how the perfect masters execute the divine plan continuously for the avatar, and how the avatar takes that fascinating unconscious role of minor advent under the veil to play the role so that that interaction can happen. This photograph was taken in 1919 at a temple in Kasbapet. You've heard of Kasbapet, where Baba had a toddy shop that he opened up with Behramji from the first photograph as a partner. And right next to the toddy shop, they opened up this little temple. I don't know if you can read that in the bottom or not. That says Sri Upasani Ashram. Sri Upasani Ashram. That is Behramji on the left. And then Nervous, one of the early disciples. Baba gave nicknames to many people because so many people had the same name. So they get nicknames. So Nervous got the nickname Nervous. He came to Baba. You see how it is when people have connections. Bailey says he met him in Calcutta. He was in an acting company, and Bailey told him about Baba, and immediately went to live with Baba. That was it. Babu Cyclewala standing next to him. There were a number of these early disciples who came to follow Baba because of Babajan, who was right in Pune, and they saw the interaction between Meherabad and Babajan from the early days, and Babajan would say things about him, and they realized that he was something. but also it was because he was extremely charismatic. There were many Muslims that followed Baba in the early days because he had an Irani background, was fluent in 7 languages, 2 Persian languages, including writing, but he also could recite poetry of Hafiz and Rumi by heart, couplets, and very beautifully, dramatically. So it was the pouring of the wine for them. There's another one of Baba's childhood friends standing there, Kodu, who got the nickname at Meherabad, Sailor. He's standing with the group of men on the right. Next to him in the white is Syed Sahib, who also came to Baba because Baba Jan directed him. Now these are people who met Meherabad in 1914, 15.
Is it Syed who came up with Meher Baba?
Syed is the one who was tending to Baba during the seclusion in the cave in 1920 late, and after meeting, he suggested the name Meher Baba. On the extreme right is Baba's eldest brother, Jamshed. Squatting down here on the floor, besides, you see Baba with the turban, and the man squatting on the floor is Gustaji. Gustaji is also one of the early personalities. Some of these people came to Sai Baba first. They had such an early inclination towards spirituality. And he lived closer. Gustaji, his boyhood home was closer to Shirdi. So he went, his mother, he said, had the habit of, even when he was a baby, going around to visit spiritual personalities. So it was just in his fate, he said. He always had done that. He first met Sai Baba about 1910. On one of the trips, Sai Baba took everything he had, so he couldn't leave. So he stayed there, and Sai Baba put him on a starvation diet, grass and some spinach. That was it. And he came to like it, so he didn't care to go. But when Sai Baba dropped his body, he was with Upasi Maharaj at the time. I'm not sure which year Upasi Maharaj went to Sikori. He may have been in Sikori or may have been at Khandaba at the time. Remember, when Meherwan went there, Baba in later 1914, Upasi Maharaj was still in the Khandaba temple when he threw the stone at Baba. But I think by that point he had gone to Sikori. Sai Baba's funeral was postponed till Gustaji returned because he was to be one of the pole bearers of Sai Baba's funeral. He was then, by direction, passed on to Upasi Maharaj, who for a few months gave him good beatings. And then he was ordered to go, around the time Mani was born, to be Baba's disciple and be with him all the time. So you see him, and Baba would order him to serve Babajan. So this is one of he was regarded by the early disciples of Baba to be the most important disciple of Baba. Baba made the comment during these years, to bow down to Gustaji is the same as to bow down to me. So they had the idea from the early days that there is some significance with particular personalities around the master. Some have greater importance. And he was always regarded by the early disciples as being the most important. Yes? Not necessarily. No. Yes, for an example. Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, do we consider the earliest disciples to be closest, the earliest chronological disciples, are they the closest? No, that's not necessarily true. Because, citing Erich as an example, it depends upon their service to him and what that entails. If we wouldn't have had Erich, if Erich was there in the early days and he would have died, then we wouldn't have had Erich around for us, which was really an important aspect of his life's work. So this interaction has to, there's a continuity that has to happen. This interaction has to go on. Let's go to the next photograph. Oh, by the way, I wanted to mention, okay, this is Vishnu. This is an early photograph of Vishnu who lived across the street from the temple at Cosmopet. And he was 15 years old at the time. And there was a personality there, so he went for darshan and prasad, 15 years old, and Baba, the way he was, oh, what's your name? Vishnu. Oh, where do you live? Over there. Yeah. Do you think your mother would mind feeding me something? No, she'd be happy. Well, and where's your father? No father? No, he died. He says, I'm your father. So Vishnu said, okay, yeah, nice thing to say, okay, whatever. A few days later, Vishnu wanted to go to the movies with his friends. And as he's about to purchase the ticket and go in, somebody grabs him. He turns around and it's Baba who slaps him. He says, what the hell do you think you're doing? Well, I'm going to the movies with my friend. What's the problem? He said, did you ask me? Did you forget I'm your father? So Vishnu and his mother were both close disciples of Baba's. Let's go to the next image. This is about 1920. This is possibly the birthday celebration for a man who's garlanded here. His name is Munshi Rahim. There are many of the old disciples here, and I won't go through all of them for you, but Arjun Supekar is in there. Baba's maternal uncle Masaji is there. He's not in there. No. This is 1920 old disciples. Bailey is in there though. A number of other. Gunny is in there by this point. You'll see Gunny in there. Gunny became reacquainted with Baba this year. And of course, Gustaji is there in front with Baba. Many of these men spent their lives in Baba's contact. Let's go to the next image. You know what? I'll just explain to you. I'm starting with these images. Why? Because I just have them. I thought I like to look at old pictures. If you like to look at old pictures, so we're doing that. It's relevant to the subject. This is a photograph about 1922, taken about 1922. This is Shireen Mai's eldest sister, Baba's mother's eldest sister, Daulat Mai, sitting there in the middle with her husband, Feridun Masa. And Bailey, the childhood friend, is sitting front and center. Standing behind to what we see is left is Naja. Naja was Baba's first cousin, the daughter of Pila Masi, another Piroja, Pilamasi, our Naja, yes, Pendu's sister, Jamshed, Baba's eldest brother, is in the center, and his wife, who is also their first cousin, we know as Big Khorshid, who lived in the ashram a number of years, is there on our right and back. Around this time also, for an example, there were others who came. Just to digress for a minute, I'll explain this much to you because I know some people will be interested in this point. You know, there's always person in Sufism, there's this term Kutub-i-Irshad, which means the head of the perfect masters. He's like the chairman of the board. And Baba explained that it's just in the nature of that one, his yoga sanskars. We don't go into that. Too many sanskars talk. But it's in his nature to be that, so he is that. Of course, when the avatar comes, he takes also that position as Kutub-i-Irshad. Baba never said when exactly that happened, but most people who are students of Baba's life and work think it happened after Baba's last long stay with Upasi Maharaj in Sakori, which ended in January 1922, or maybe October 1922, his last trip to Sakori while Upasi Maharaj was still alive. Around that time, there were other disciples who were coming, you know, in Baba's contact. Fraine's grandfather was an Irani man who came to India, who had an affinity for the spiritual personalities. And in 1922, he was working in a tea shop across from Babajan's. So he had heard of this Irani saint. Now remember, we have all of this information at our fingertips now. All these explanations that Baba had given, we freely access and understand and make sense of it. At the time, they didn't know these things, perfect master, saint, whatever, something. But they knew there was something with these personalities. There was no denying for the people who really had an affinity that Babajan was something. And Babajan would talk about Merwan. And Upasi Maharaj talked about him. So Baidul, who is not Baidul yet, that was a nickname given to him. He was another Rustam. So he got a nickname. Most of these nicknames were given humorously. Anyway, he was working at a tea shop and he heard about this Irani saint who was still living in Pune at the time, but was about to leave for Bombay. So he went to meet him at Cosmopet and went upstairs and saw Adi meditating. Adi was one of the early disciples. And he thought that was Baba, so he went and bowed down to him, which woke Adi out of his meditation and startled him. And he says, "What the hell are you doing?" And something. And aren't you Mayor Baba? No. Okay. So immediately it's a humorous thing. But at the time, Baba was giving this very serious, it's a typical thing in his life, a very serious direction. Now I'm going to Bombay to start this ashram. I want all of you to consider whether you really fully accept obeying me or not, and whether you're willing to dedicate your lives for some years to me. We may be there a few years, and will you do that? I want you to think about it. Now, Baidul already had a wife and kids in Iran too, but he had come to India specifically. He had this inclination. But you see the close connection with people. What he did immediately was take the paper and sign it. That's it. That was his nature. There was no thinking about it. It was like that also for people like Pendu. Pendu was Baba's cousin. His mother died in 1917, 1918. And Baba at that time told his name was Asfandiar. Pendu was also a nickname. Baba told him at the time, he told Pendu's and Naja's father, they're not your responsibility anymore. I'll take care of them till the very end. Pendu said when he was a kid, he would hear Baba sing prayers in the morning. And he said, oh, nobody sings like Meherwan. Wouldn't it be nice if he was God? So it turned out to be that way. Pendu at the time was working in Quetta. Let's look at the next image, if I have Pendu in there. This is a photograph of Pendu in Quetta. I think this was taken in 1929 later, but it's... I always thought that would make a nice Christmas card for Meherazad. So in 1922, when Baba was at Mandali Meme, Pendu was Asfandiar was sent by who was he working for, by the way, in Quetta? Goher's father. There are all these connections. They're all connected. So he came back to Bombay to do purchasing. Nobody was allowed to go into Mandali Meme. So people he knew Padri from the time he was a kid. They were childhood companions, his own father. But the order was don't speak to anybody. So he'd go to the gate and nobody looked at him. And he was trying to speak to them. He said, what the hell's going on here? I want to see Meherwan. So word went to Baba and he said, let him in. So he said, what are you here for? I want to stay with you. What are you doing? Well, I'm working for Pop and Gwenda. But I have a responsibility to purchase right now. He said, give the money to so-and-so and that's it. You're done. Now you're here. That was it. That's how they came. Connections. No denying it. Let's look at the next photograph. This was taken about 1922 or 23. This is Gulmai on the right and her husband Kansep Kaikushru and their daughters Piroja and Mandali in front. The two sons, Rustam and Adi, were likely with Baba at Mandali Meme at this time. So they won't be in this photograph. If this was taken later in Ahmednagar, they would also not be in this photograph because they'd still be with Baba. This is the family that gave the property of Meherabad, the trust compound, and everything else they had to Meher Baba. Yes. No, there would, but you see the border was specific to the Parsis. That was a Parsi, a Zoroastrian Parsi style border that was specific. Mm. Yes. Now Gulmai met Baba at Sakori. She met him when he was Meherwan. She met him before she met Upasi Maharaj. And she had heard about the special disciple of Upasi Maharaj's. But she was deeply attracted to Upasi Maharaj through her personal spiritual experiences. But also to Meherwan, his disciple. In January 1921, when she was there at Sakori, Merwan, then Meher Baba, told her that she was his spiritual mother. So she was respected as such throughout her life because of Baba's statement. She suffered a lot from her Orthodox Zoroastrian community because of all of this, but she had no interest in all of that. She went to Pasi Maharaj in the first place because she was a person who was so despondent about worldly affairs. And she got meaning and relief of all that by associating with the masters. Next photograph, please. This is the woman, the man standing in between is also named Kaikushu. He's known as Kaikushu Masa. He is the husband of Gulmai's sister Suna, who is there on the right. And the little girl with her knee on her mother's, with her head on her mother's knee is small Khorshid, our Khorshid.
Kind of interesting too, because Golmai was friends with Galori Shah.
The whole family was friends with Galori Shah. And what's also interesting about that is because Galori Shah had this connection with England, and the royal family specifically. But Baba said that Khorshid was the reincarnation of Queen Victoria. So there's this connection there. And you know, Baba said that Vishnu had been Napoleon. So you have all this, which shows you that in the process of persons becoming prepared, now it's not by accident that anybody, or randomness that anybody comes into the circle of the perfect master, or specifically the avatar. Baba said, these are souls that are deserving of God realization through their past efforts.
I've heard the story that Queen Victoria was the reincarnation of one of not Sita's women.
I didn't hear that.
Okay, that Queen Victoria was the reincarnation of one of Sita's women.
Yes, so Baba had said that they were.
Yeah, and that she had been so in love with Rama, but Rama said to her, not now, but sometime later, and so that he was Albert to Victoria.
Who was Albert?
Rama.
That's not true, but anyway, that's. Yeah. These are, some of these stories get all convoluted. We stick to what Meher Baba said, and this is what we're. But Baba did say that they had connections with him in past advents. That is true. Kaikushu Masa was a very spiritually inclined person. He sat in a Chilanashini in his apartment in Bombay. It's not the same as in a jungle with tigers around. Okay, it was in an apartment in Bombay in a circle in the corner. But nonetheless, he stayed awake and fasted for, I forget how many days, if he made the full 40 days. A long time. A long time. He was a very skilled jeweler, and suddenly came across a lot of wealth after he did the Chilanashini. And Khorshid was born after that. The wealth came with all of this. And in the early years when he met Baba, he gifted Baba a case full of this jewelry that he had made. And Baba looked at it and said, oh, beautiful, nice work, but what am I going to do with this stuff? So Baba told him, just sell it. But bring the case back to me. I want that case. Steel case with a lock. So he sold the jewelry to to give the money to Baba, and the first long stay at Meherabad was mostly funded by his gift of money to Baba, which was a lot of money during those days, some few lakhs of rupees, a lot of money. But Baba started the schools and the hospital at Meherabad and the big colony there through his generous gift. The woman on the other side is his sister Moti. All of his family members were adamantly opposed to Baba. They were worldly people who were adamantly opposed to Baba. And they realized that he was selling his jewelry because his work was so good and unique that when a piece would come up for sale somewhere, it could be recognized. Didn't have to have a name on it. So they realized he was selling his jewelry and giving the money to Baba. In 1929, he shipped some of his furniture to Nasik, but the family was becoming more adamantly opposing Baba at the time, and they kidnapped him while Baba was in Iran. Then they kept him for 1 year locked in a room. Because there was a law at the time, they made him sign something. There was a law at the time that if a last will and testament was left uncontested for a year, it stood good. So they kidnapped him and locked him in a room. And his health deteriorated through the years from all of this trouble he got from them. But he finally was released in 1930, and he spent the last few months in Nasik, where he died in January 31 in Baba's arms. He gave his bed to Baba, and you see that at Meherabad now. Baba rarely accepted these kind of things from people, that big bed. But now you know the backstory. But there's another interesting story. Why did Baba want that steel case? When he started writing the book, he kept the book locked in that steel case. The book is gone, but we still have the steel case. Can we go to the next image, please? Now, this is a close-up of the wedding of Rustam and Freni, the reception picture outside the Zoroastrian fire temple in Ahmednagar. And the reason I just picked this one so that you could see some of the people in it, but prominently front and center is Mani. Miss Mani as Irani right there, front and center. On the right side there is Adi Jr., Baba's youngest brother. And standing just behind him is small Khurshid now. And behind her right shoulder is big Khurshid. Adi's sisters Dali and Paroja are there. No, this is only a portion of the picture. Behind left is Kanseb Kaikushru, and the man very behind is Kaikushu Masa, Khurshid's father. He's behind the man with the white kind of turban there. Yes, there. Right in front of him is Baba's mother, Shireen Mai. And standing next to her is Naja. The girl in front of them, holding the hand of Piroja, one of the sisters, is Goher.
She's adorable.
But who's the one on the way left on the bottom next to Goher?
I don't know who that is. But this is an example of how these people are connected to each other, and they are all deeply connected to him. See the size of Khorshid, small Khorshid there. 1 year later, she was living with Baba as one of the earliest women disciples. 1 year later, 14 years old. 14 years old. She was 13 in this photograph. When she turned 14, she started living with Baba as one of the earliest women disciples. Deep past connection. Let's go to the next image. This is a picture of Adi at the time. Adi Keirani. He is the second son of Gulmai and Kaikushru, one of the inner circle of Baba. We know for sure that the four pillars of Meherabad, one of them being Adi, has to be in the inner circle. So he's an example of one of the inner circle people. He also met Baba when first at Sakori, and he was very much also dedicated to Upasi Maharaj, who used to write him letters while he was away at school. He had correspondence with Upasi Maharaj in Marathi. Can you imagine that?
Those letters, are they in the...
I don't know if they're saved or if they're in the archives, whatever happened to them. But that was the word. In 1921, Baba came to Ahmednagar for the grand opening of their house, their new house, Sarosh Manzil. And Adi became very sick at the time, and Baba nursed him. And talked to him. He realized that how could somebody care this much about me? And Baba at that time told him, you have a great destiny with me. And he was exhilarated, he said. He told me a story once. I was standing in front of the reception office at the trust compound, and he came and stood next to me. Early years, 75 maybe, it's like that. He said, in 1921, sir, I was standing exactly where you are now. And Baba came and stood exactly where I am. I was younger than you are now. At that very moment, Gilori Shah came to the gate and called me, Adi. Baba said, don't move. Again he called, Adi. And I didn't move. I looked at Baba. One more time, Gilori Shah called to me, Adi. And I stayed put. He said, this is my first lesson, sir. Follow one master and one master only. 17 years old. Next image, please. I think this is taken probably late 20s, maybe 1930. I think it's late 20s, so maybe 27 though, something like that. The four pillars of Meherabad were all born within 6 months of each other. That's another example of how, when the time comes, they take their places and are born. Vishnu was born in June. Adi and Pendu were born in September. Padri was born in November. Sarosh, also one of the early disciples, was born. Baba's brother Jal, also 1902, earlier than them, the year before. But amongst Baba's brothers, Jal probably spent the most time with Baba. This is a picture, I just wanted to give you a picture of Baba with Mera and Mani because the two most important disciples are the two appendages. Though they have less to do with the world itself, the work itself, in that sense, they have more to do with the purpose of creation. Going back to that technical explanation, those two appendages, one, the most important, we don't have words suitable in the English language to describe this. Even we say they're spiritual archetypes, which is kind of a quick explanation. But it can't come close to how Bob explains it in that discourse about his circle. Who they are, what they are. And that is only a few pages. There's a lot more to it. But Mera, he said, represented original Maya, the original other, initial duality, from which all creation is based. Money represents unconscious, infinite unconsciousness. God in creation manifests as Ishwar, creator, preserver, and destroyer of all things. All the other circle members have their basis in them. But most important is always, always the Mera figure. And Baba's words simply sum that up the best. I love you all for your sakes. I love Mera for my sake. This is taken, I believe, 1935, probably, the summer of 1935. April or May, probably. Next photograph, please. This is a photograph taken in 1937 when the first Westerners had come to stay in an ashram for Baba in India. It also includes many of the Eastern disciples at the time. But there were many Western people who Baba said were members of his circle also. Not first circle, but close. There's Padre standing with his hand on his hip. But in there you can see Masaji on the ground sitting before Padre, Vishnu next to him, Adi front and center, Will Backett from England is there next to Adi. Chanji is next to Will Backett. Important. Pendu standing behind on the left. Next to him is Nani, Rano's mother. Norina behind Baba's shoulder. Garrett Fort next to Baba. Yes, he was still there at the time. Kitty there. You know. Herbert wasn't there anymore. Herbert wasn't there. That's Tom Sharpley. Malcolm Schloss sitting on the chair next to Padre. Elizabeth next to him. Elizabeth Patterson is probably the person in the Western world who had done more in service for Meher Baba than anybody else in the Western world. Margaret is there.
Where's Margaret?
Sitting next to Elizabeth.
Right below Garrett Ford.
And that's Delia next to Margaret and Nadine Tolstoy with the white hat.
Whatever happened to Garrett Ford?
He was very restless, wanted to leave. Baba advised him to travel around India if he had some notions. He traveled a little bit, he would write long letters to Baba, insisted on going back. He said, at least I could go back and earn something for you. Bob advised him to stay and just wait it out. He didn't. He went back, couldn't get work anymore, got depressed, committed suicide by sedatives on Halloween 1946. Yeah. Halloween was important for Garrett Ford's suicide because he was the screenwriter for Frankenstein and the Werewolf and yes. Hmm. I think he's the one who actually came up with the line, "It's alive! It's alive!" Rano next to Nadine Tolstoy there. Rano's the one Western woman who lived with Baba till and lived there for the rest of her life, who was not sent back. The one who was not sent back. She did very important work as an artist for Baba. All of these charts we had that were done by hand by Rano. Very important stuff. And she was a very down-to-earth, practical person, very unassuming, wonderful, wonderful person. That's Malcolm Schloss, the poet Malcolm Schloss, great poet. Anyway, this was taken, and I just wanted you all to see that now some Westerners are coming in, and they're also circle members, not somewhere in the succeeding circles. There is a difference in people who are downline and the people who are very close to Baba. And the difference was that Baba, for those who were very close to him, could give them very harsh treatment. And they didn't mind. They could take it. They were made to take it. He could be very severe with them, humiliate them. Usually if Baba wanted to get a message to somebody over there who was doing something wrong, he would take one of the Mandali and blast them for some little thing, knowing that's how that person could take it. In the early days at Meherabad, if there was a problem with the women's ashram, the cooking or something, Naja would get a slap. Naja would always be the one. She could take it. She'd never leave. But the difference is this, Baba said, that is the treatment that creates real consciousness. So look at it this way. Think of it in terms of sanskaric surgery. The close people to Baba would get sanskaric surgery without anesthesia. The downline people and Baba lovers, in different varying degrees, get sanskaric surgery with local anesthesia. And the world in general just gets sanskaric surgery with general anesthesia. They don't know anything what's happening. It's just something's going on and blah, blah, and they get an effect. That's how it is. But for those who really were close to him, that was, but the result will be not just God realization, they will be made perfect to work. They will be perfect masters. This is what Baba has said. It's a very rare thing. It's not for everybody. Have to be made for it. Huh? They will be perfect masters, many of them. Taking positions at different points through the next centuries. But the first circle must, as Baba said, be realized within 100 years after he drops his body. In that period. They must have realization. So,
They had to be born again if they had died, right?
yes, you can't.
I mean, Lonnie,
Yeah, Scott, did you have a question? No, the first circle people, many of them, Baba had said, you know, we used to take, for those of us who would go there in the early days, we went there to absorb Baba's humanity. We just wanted to be with them. And Mani would say things every occasionally. Baba said I had to live one more lifetime as a man. And we thought, oh, isn't that cute? You know, but not thinking, thinking all of this information wasn't soaked in, that there are 8,400,000 reincarnations in the average experience of the soul. And that's it. You're on the last one. How significant. And some of them were like, Baba said that guy's its last lifetime and is 85 years old. That's pretty significant. It's not, I thought of it in terms because I like to do kind of, some of these things are too difficult to grasp. So I like to think of it in terms of a linear graph. So if you divided an average lifetime into 5-minute segments, 8,400,000 comes up to like maybe 5 minutes each if you're into the 80s late in years. You can consider every 5 minutes of a person's life, if they're 80-some years old, as a lifetime segment. And that tells you that if that person is on their last lifetime, they're in the last 5 minutes of their existence, basically. Padre told me, he said, when we were young, Padre was also one of those people. He was 18 years old when he came to be Baba's disciple. One of the inner circle of Baba. He said it was difficult at times. They were young. They'd get fed up. He said, we'd get fed up and want to leave. And he said, Baba would tell me, you have no idea. You're that close. You are that close to it. Just do what I say.
Peter, to get back to Scott's question
about
So, another time when we were living there, Mani came in once and again casually said, Baba said I have one more lifetime and it'll be as a man. And Erich has to come back as a woman. Yeah. Baba actually did say, he made these remarks about when people enter the circle, they have a specific look and a specific gender, and when they end, they have to be the same. The person is in the circle until realization. There's no going out. Once you are in a circle, there's no going out of it. You are there until the end. That's your destiny. So they'll both be perfect masters. They never talk about such things. We never heard this kind of talk, ever from them.
But doesn't it have to happen within a
We never heard it happen what?
within a certain period?
Well, we just said that, yes. It happens within the 100 years that first circle has to have after he drops his body. Yes.
I never heard that Baba was harsh with Mani or Meher.
Very little. Very little. Not bad. Not bad. But the thing is, they were basically prepared. Mani would get scolded. But she got, you remember the story where she got slapped because she didn't take her shoes off at Meherabad? As a little girl. Oh, yes. Yes. Mera got an elbow once and a light slap from Baba for something. But they didn't mind those things. They actually kind of envied others who would get some of that. Sometimes, yes. Remember Adi Senior's comment. I had many kicks and kisses from the Master, sir, but it is the kicks I remember the best. Others came, but for an example, Khorshid's father. He's somebody who was prepared, and there was no harshness to people like that. Munshi, old man who was spiritually inclined, They were already pure, and they were not mediums for the work. So, in that sense, you see, the point is, there has to be a something. There has to be a quirk, a little something left dangling there that he works with through them as a medium, as an archetype for all of creation. And that's why there has to be something left there, some fault. There has to be something. And they were ready to give it all. They were ready for everything. Any humiliation, and it would be humorous to them, they didn't care. They didn't care what people thought. The thing about the Mandali, I will say is this. In the world, people pretend like they care about people, but they really only care about what people think about them. With Baba's close people, they don't care what people think, yet they care deeply about people. Totally the opposite. You don't find that quality. And after years of observing those kind of behaviors, you see that. They had the habit of being absolutely forthright and frank with each other. Baba encouraged it. Baba encouraged it. But if they had an argument and shouted at each other, a minute later they would forget it. I've seen it. More than once. It was their nature. It's the way Baba made them. They were like that. Especially the Iranis. But let's go to another picture if we have. I'm not aware of the time. I don't know what's going on here, but we're just rambling. This is a photograph taken. Okay. This is a photograph taken maybe 1939, 40. Who's on the left? Vishnu? Kakabarya. Here's another one of the close disciples. Is that Pendu? I can't tell from here. Adi, Padri. There's Ramju Abdullah, which we haven't talked about yet. Ramju Abdullah was most likely also in the inner circle. One of the positions, one of the posts of the inner circle people, you see what happens. They represent a finite opposite aspect, so that the avatar, in opposition to them, may express the infinite aspect. So one of the positions, for an example, is infinite misery, so that the avatar can express infinite happiness. And once in a meeting, Baba commented, "When I see Ramju, I see infinite unhappiness, but I will make him." So every time one of these people would drop their bodies and be done, then Baba would, for an example, Gustaji. After Gustaji died in 1958, Baba explained that he actually got realization. And Baba used to refer to Gustaji as his dark side. He had first revealed this in 1927. Gustaji got depressed about it. And Baba one day said, "What are you so down about?" He said, "I'm just the dark side." He says, I was tortured by Sai Baba and Upasya Maharaj, and I'm with you for so many years, and I'm nothing about it. What point is it? And Baba just laughed and said, "You don't understand what that means, but there's great significance to it. It means that because of that doesn't mean Gustaji was dark. He's a great personality and a very pure person and all that, but through Gustaji, the avatar could access all darkness in every soul in the universe, so that he could bring infinite light." It's like that's the role they play. The first circle specifically represents an original opposite finite aspect of God's infinite benevolence. That point came up because we saw Ramju here and we haven't mentioned Ramju yet. Next to him is Sarosh, also one of the old, very close Mandali. Gave everything to Baba. His father was adamantly opposed to Baba, so he was always caught between a rock and a hard place in the earlier years. But by this point, I think his father died around this time. The man on the right is Mina Barucha, who was also one of the childhood friends, who was kind of a link between... Baba sent him, when he came to Baba in 1930 as a disciple, Baba sent him to Upasi Maharaj. Very odd thing. But in the early days, Baba would often send certain people to visit other masters who weren't... But the difference is that Mina Barucha was closely connected to Baba. An interesting part of this story is that you may remember Hoshan Barucha, Dr. Barucha, who was interested in all of these kind of technical spiritual things. So Baba humored him and would let him in on certain things, like told him who the 5 perfect masters were, and told him who the circle people... He showed him the list of the circle people that Pleader had. It was returned to him, and he saw that. So when Dr. Barucha came to the States once, after Baba dropped the body, he told Darwin and Jean, "Oh, you're circle members." Darwin and Jean Shah, for an example. And somebody said, "Oh, are you in the circle?" He said, "There's only one Barucha in the circle, and it's not me." And not only that, he's in the very last circle. And that was Mina Barucha, according to what he said. Just, we're just talking. Nothing here, but... He was also one of those people who Baba said was on his last life. That was it. So he was generally pretty happy. But an interesting thing Minu told me, he said once when he was with Upasi Maharaj, once Maharaj told him, "If you knew what I did to you in your last life, you never would have come around me now." Yeah. It's annihilation of the false self. It sounds fine in the discourses, but when you're going through it, it's not enjoyable. Do we have any more photographs? There's a photograph of Padre. This is what Padre just... His purpose was just to work for Baba, and this is just a photograph taken by Faramji of Padre painting the ceiling of Baba's cabin on the hill, probably sometime in the 40s. Next, are there any more? Yes. There's a picture of Padre in the older days. This is the way he looked. I want to go to further pictures here. This is an important photograph here, 1960, because we can now finally see Fraine's grandfather for the first time there standing on the left. This is about 1960. Vishnu is still alive. Next to him, Meherji Karkarya. And there is Erich. Right behind Baba, we finally see a photograph of Erich. There's Pendu. Ben Haman, one of the close Western disciples. Meherwan Jesawala, also one of those people who was, Baba said he was a saint. He never got hammered. There was nothing to hammer. And on the other side of the story is, Baba couldn't have circle members like Meherwan Jesawala. He wasn't in the circle. There wasn't enough for Baba to work with there. He's just almost, what's left? Oliba, on the other hand, there's Oliba. One of the Mayor Ashram boys who came to live with Baba as one of the Mandali. Great eccentric personality. Next to him, Francis Brabazan, who was living with Baba by this point. And there's Kakabaria, the arch enemy of Baidu. Baba would often create circumstances so that Baidu and Kaka would have some altercation, and that was Baba's enjoyable live drama. And that's Bao standing on the extreme right.
Yes, but who was the better must hunter?
Who depends who you ask. But Baba did say that Frainie's grandfather was the Sardar, the chief of the musts. Chief of the musts hunting.
Marilyn says in his book the only time Baba ever chastised him was when he lied to him about eating the tamarind pot.
Yes. Well, but really speaking, that wasn't his fault. It was his cohort. Who was that? Yes. Frainie's mother.
The way he tells it, he sounds like he's equally guilty.
Yes. Sarvar would say that. Merwan was so good all the time, and Meru would also say, Merwan was so good all the time, he would take the blame for things. He was a good companion. It's getting late. I want to end, since I'm seeing a picture of Vishnu here, while we have him there, I want to end with the story of Vishnu's death, which is remarkable. That was Adi in the later years. Let's go back to the previous photograph where you can see Vishnu. Vishnu, you can see the three people involved in this drama, at least. Picture of Varaj. That's a later picture.
You want me to go
Back, yes. No, too far. We're looking, keep going. We're looking, let's keep this one on here. In May 1962, Baba was again at Guru Prasad in the summer, and you all know that he enjoyed Qawwali music. But it was in the Urdu language, which is similar to Hindi. And Francis was living with Baba, and he would be so frustrated hearing these great singers sing this high spiritual poetry and not being able to understand it. So Francis was sitting there listening, and he was sitting next to Bao. And frustrated, every once in a while, he'd lean over to Bao and say, "What's he trying to say now?" And so Bao would have to explain, it means this and means that and whatever. And Vishnu wasn't there, he was doing the marketing, so later on, Bao was with Vishnu in the Mandali, by the men Mandali side. And Vishnu asked Bao, "How was the music program today?" He says, "It was good, but I couldn't pay attention to it." "Well, why not?" "Well, Francis was sitting there beside me, and he was constantly asking me for interpretation, so I couldn't pay attention as well as I would have liked to." He said, "But then the funny thing happened. There was Jimmy Mystery on the other side. And Jimmy Mystery had a good sense of humor. He saw what was happening. To bring light to the situation, he just started making up any kind of a thing. He said, this means this, that, this. He's thinking about any kind of odd thing to Francis." And Vishnu laughed so hard he died of a heart attack. Yes. He died of a heart attack. So now he died laughing. So Bao is there, and he sends a message inside. God. Bao says, "My God." So he sends a message, Vishnu is apparently dead. Goher comes and examines him. Yes, he's dead. He had a heart attack and died. Baba sends a message back. It goes back to Baba, and he sends a message back. "I'll come in 5 or 10 minutes. Baba came with money and Goher on Mani's arm. Now, as Vishnu's body was laid out, flat, laid out on a bench there. As they're approaching, now Mani would tell the story, and this is one of the stories when she would tell us, she would say, "Now I want you all to turn off your tape recorders." Yeah. And Mani said, as they approached, Baba said, speak out loudly. Vishnu Baba is, you speak out loudly that, tell Vishnu I'm coming. So as they approached, Mani said, Vishnu, Baba is coming. And he opened his eyes. This is not miraculous. This is an example of the will they had. So Baba's remark was, see how he obeys me, even in death. Quite remarkable.
Now we want an image.
Padre?
Yes. Come on. Let's see a Padre. What do you think Padre would say about all of us right here today?
Padre's the other direction.
There's Padre and Peter and Bobby. Oh, that's great.
How did all these get on there?
We call him.
This is taken the day after Adi died in Andhra, and we were waiting for the taxi to come for the funeral. This is March 1980. Yeah.
So what's the Padre story?
What's the Padre story? Let me think of one that is good for general audiences.
And those
Oh, look at that.
Look at that. That's 1979.
Oh, look at Mara.
Who's the woman on the...
That's
Christine Milger.
Oh,
from our town.
Christine Milger.
And then that's Christine Nordeen on the other.
Christine Zaleski.
That's Al. And there's Debbie and Peter. Oh, Mara. Mara looks so nice.
Debbie Neese.
Another girl from our town.
What are
Oh,
the,
my.
what is this?
Who's the guy in the glasses?
What are, how come you put all of these on there? Let's just,
I snuck a few.
ah,
I like Monty's outfit.
okay. That is wonderful. And that's Louis.
Is it David Barrison with the hat?
No, it's Jacko.
That's Louis.
Jacko and Louis. Our brother Louis.
Oh, that's
Youngest brother.
Louis.
Yeah, that's Louis.
Yeah, and that's
Mm.
And that's Jacko.
Padre, please just...
What?
do a Padre.
Padre's
Bruce, put
influence on you.
Padre on there. We'll do one Padre story. Yeah. No. There's Erich. There. There's one with Kendu.
This is Pindu and Khorshid. That's nice.
Those were the days.
Those were the days.
Visitors leave at 6.
Yeah.
Gradually, we made, you see that sign, visitors leave by, they started then, in those days, visitors leave by 6 p.m. Then gradually time came 5 p.m., 4, and gradually it just became visitors, please leave. Sorry. Okay. There he is.
Padre we know.
Wow, those are some bifocals. Oh, or is that his side things?
What to say? What to say? Yes.
Tell the story of when he died.
When he died?
That's not hearing him.
Yeah, you won't hear him, but when he died, he was sitting on a chair in front of his room. He had a habit of putting his feet up on the windowsill. He was dictating a letter to Don Stevens through Bobby Street, to Don Stevens through Bobby Street about donations for the homeopathic dispensary. And Bobby had finished taking the dictation. He said, Padre Kaka, how would you like to end this, close this letter? Padre said, yours sincerely. He wrote that down. He said, anything else? No response. He looked over, Said he saw a vein in Padre's forehead like this, an intense look through the window. I mean, collapsed. So his death was a poetic envy of the other Mandali.
And he always said, Padre had said, I should say, somebody, Gary, upon your asking, how do you think you'll die, Padre? And Padre said, son, I'll go out like a...
Yeah, I used to say, when I go, I'll go out like a light. Don't worry about it. Why? Because in 1980, in 1980, Padre became seriously ill with pneumonia in his left lung. They did tests on him and realized that he had had a previous heart attack, and maybe 20 years before, 15 at least. And the cardiologist said, "You've had a heart attack before." "Yes, what of it?" "Well, what did you do?" "I took whatever the remedy was. I took such and such, and that was it." But many of the Mandali died of heart attacks. It's hard on the heart living this life.
Peter, what's the story of the Mandali that you had to bring back? That was
No, that was Adi, and that was Robert Dreyfus, Jack Small, and Steve Barry, who were on that trip with Adi.
and that was that day you guys were.
And that was the day you saw the photograph. We were waiting there at Meherabad for Adi's body. They took him back overnight. It was over 24 hours later, that ride in the taxi. They sat him up in the back seat, one on each side. And he was turning fine colors by the time his body got there, definitely. Because it was against the law they wanted to get him back quickly, and they realized that it would have taken too much time to go through the red tape, and they would not get his body back in time, so he would have had to be cremated there. And because each of them, aside to this, is during the new life, to stress the finality of the new life, Baba said, "Now you're all going to die sometime, and I'll give you a choice. Some of you have a choice to be buried here at Meherabad or cremated. So make that choice now, and it'll be recorded." So Adi was to be buried at Meherabad, and everybody knew that, so they had to get his body back to Meherabad. In order to do that before his body became really decomposed, waiting days for red tape to be done, they did it just like that. Sat him up in the back and rode back. Took turns.
The taxi driver thought.
I don't know, but I can tell you, just being close I was there to take his body out of the car when he arrived. I took his under the shoulders and placed him in the coffin. I still have the hammer that was used. We had a lot of nails in the lid, so people could take turns putting a nail in the coffin. Still have that hammer. But even that smell was in my nose for a few days. So what about them? Yeah. But Adi loved to tour and talk about Baba, and he died with his boots on that way. And every time one would die, Padre said, "Well, another wicket has fallen. Who is next?" Huh? Wicket. It's a cricket expression. When Kaikabad died, here's another story for an example involving Fraine's grandfather and Dr. Barucha. Dr. Barucha was invited to stay at Meherazad for a week, late 50s, early 60s. During those years, Baba was working with Kaikabad. Kaikabad was one of the rare persons who had experiences of Baba, because all he did was pray and take Baba's name. He was Parsi high priest, an old man, and he just prayed and took Baba's name. Now, the Mandali didn't give value to this. It was valuable for Baba's particular work with him. But as far as they were concerned, somebody once said to Adi, wow, Kaikabad, he had spiritual experiences, huh? So Baba used him. He prayed a lot, right? He prayed a lot. And Adi's comment was, yes, that's all he was good for. To them it was just, here's a long list of work Baba has given us to do, and we have to get this thing done. But Hoshan Barucha, Parsi from Navsari, center of the Parsis, saw Kaikabad there, knew he was the high priest from Navsari who had come to live with Baba as one of the disciples in 1944. Baba was using him. He had experiences because he used to take Baba's name 100,000 times a day. From the 40s, when he started staying at Meherabad, he stayed up on the hill and started doing that. Kaikobad. So he began having experiences of seeing, when I mentioned Kirpal Singh, when Kirpal Singh came to meet Baba at Satara in 1956, Baba gave him that explanation. It's only one experience to me, and the rest of this is not worth calling experience. But if you go and talk to that old man, Kaikabad, he claims he's seeing something. So he went to Kaikabad and spoke to him about his experiences, and Kirpal Singh came back and said, this is the most astounding thing I've ever heard in my life about this man and the light he sees in you and orbs and all this stuff. And he said, Baba just like that. The Mandali didn't give great importance to these things in general. It's just could be anybody. They've seen musts and other God-realized persons around Baba, and it was all about Baba's work. That's all. They were for that, whatever purpose it was. So anyway, Hoshan Barucha was there. He had this idea, and Baba's one of those days, and Baba says to him, what are you thinking? This Kaikapad, you use him with your work, he must be advanced, he must be something. Spiritual man, religious. Baba says, Kaikapad, it's okay, it's experiences or whatever, I use him because of that as a medium. See Baidul over there? Jungli Irani, he doesn't speak English, uneducated. He's an uncouth person. But he's in my circle. Kaikabad, not so necessarily. Compared to Baidul, Kaikabad is not nearly as advanced.
Say it again.
Baba said, Baidul is more advanced. He's in my circle. They had to have that. And Baidul was a great example of a person with strong personality. But he also, things were said, Baidul had that obedience. Baba referred to him as, we talked about Baba's explanation, the parts of his body. Baba referred to Baidul as his nose. He was an inquisitive type of person. And that's why Baba made him the chief of the must hunters, because he could do remarkable things.
You said he knew them by their fragrance, didn't he?
He had some sense. People would see him do things. Bao would tell the story of, he said, we would be sitting in the hall, and suddenly Baba would have a whim, and he would turn to Baidul and say, that must is somewhere out in the jungle at such and such a district in that state. Can you bring him? Yes. And then Bao says, then the drama would begin. Baba would say, take money from Kaka. So they would argue about the budget for a while. and Bao would say, you know, Bidel was tough. He didn't want to stay in a hotel, so he would just save the money for good food. No toothbrush, nothing. The clothes he had on, to clean his teeth, just break off a tree twig just in the morning. Tough, tough. Just travel and food, nothing more. Sleep on the veranda, sleep on the railway platform. That's all. It might take him weeks to find a person to come back, but he'd bring the must.